Hello, everyone. This is Seth, one of the co-hosts of Engaged Podcast, to bring you today another great episode of Engaged Podcast. But before I can get into that, I just want to say real quick, if you haven't done this yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you're listening on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Podcast Addict, Overcast, YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That way, every Thursday, you won't have to look for us. You won't have to wait for us. Boom, we're going to be on your phone waiting for you to listen. So it's super simple, super easy. Also, if you haven't had a chance yet, go ahead and go over to our YouTube page. The link for that's down in the show notes. We have all kinds of good content for you. Like one, you can see today's podcast happen in real time, and this week is a great week to do that. You can really feel like you're sitting at the table with us and engaging with the guest alongside us. Also, there's book reviews. There are music reviews. We're currently reviewing the band U2. We're listening to different songs by U2 and giving our reaction and our review of. It's been such a huge pleasure to do that, and a lot of people have given us great feedback about it. We also have our Sunday morning live stream services, so if you want to worship with us and you don't live close enough to visit us, go ahead and watch online every Sunday, 11 a.m. on our YouTube page. Our guest today was a fantastic guest to have. Her name is Judge Nicholson. Now, again, if you've listened to this show before, you know that I am completely ignorant when it comes to like the world of judges and local government. It's not on my radar. It just isn't. However, over the last couple of weeks, we have interviewed a lot of not just local government leaders, but also we've interviewed attorneys and different judges and such. And I can honestly say I have learned a lot about just how important and what people like commissioners do and people like judges do and what local government looks like. So getting to sit down with someone like Judge Nicholson was a huge pleasure for me, and it was a great opportunity for me to ask some questions that I've always wanted to ask a judge. And Pastor Anthony asked some incredible, good, thought-provoking questions, and they had a bit of a history. Judge Nicholson used to actually teach Pastor Anthony back when he was in high school, so that we kind of talk a little bit about that. But we talk about a whole bunch of different things. Government, we talk about the Founding Fathers. We talk about so many things in this podcast that you're in it for a really good episode. Now, I just want to say this. Unfortunately, I don't know why, but like from the beginning, we had issues with our microphones. Now, I ended up just I didn't want to be sucked into dealing with the technical thing, so I ended up just letting it go. And what you hear is not the usual quality of audio, but however, it is the backup audio from the interview. So even though it's not entirely, it doesn't sound the same as our usual interviews, you could still hear it, you could still listen to it. You just might hear some things like humming, and it might sound a little bit off. But I personally, the episodes are great. I doubt you'll even notice. So give it up for our friend Judge Nicholson.
Welcome back to Engaged Podcast Studios. This is Anthony Claudius here with, of course, Seth. We're so glad to see you, Seth, today. I like your new haircut.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Yes.
Appreciate that.
Today we have the great privilege and honor of sitting with Jennifer Nicholson. Jennifer is the district judge, the magisterial district judge in Lawrence County.
Yes.
Did you find us okay?
I did. It was pretty easy.
Yeah, just straight on 18, right?
Although Google Maps told me 20 minutes. It's not 20 minutes.
It's not 20. You know what it is? It's the lights. Once you hit the lights at like the sheets all the way through.
Makes sense.
You go like 5 feet, but it takes you 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that happens a lot. It's a bummer. But you're here.
Right.
Right? Okay, so tell everybody how we know each other.
we know each other from back when I was in college. I was student teaching a government class, and Anthony was in it. And he was taking it ahead of time. He didn't fail, but he was, I thought, one of the most intelligent people in it because he had great views and he could back them all up.
And this is when I was like, what, 17 or something?
Yeah.
I didn't pay her to say that, too. But it makes me feel good because I didn't have a lot of self-awareness back in those days. So it just feels good to have someone that was observing, you know. So apparently it would rile everybody up.
Yep.
And then we were talking about this before because then Seth said, what?
More than anything, it's more about I love finding out just what he was like in high school. Okay, because one of someone he used to go to school with, Shauna, and I'm gonna give her a shout out. Shauna is
she might have even been in the class. My goodness, Shauna Haswell. I don't know.
I don't remember.
But she, I just asked her, what was it like hanging out with Anthony in high school? And her reply was, he was a great guy, but after you hung out with him, I had to go home and rest. She's like, I had to just like sit alone for a little bit and just relax. And I said, that kind of fits in how that is today. You still are like that, but that's why I love you.
Do you want to know something else connected to that class?
Sure.
So I think there was 2 carloads that would come over from Newcastle to Elwood, and it's like what, 25-minute maybe ride?
Something like that.
This is an absolute we would get every condiment known to man, like all those ketchup packets, mustard, all that stuff. And God forbid if whoever was behind if there was a red light or a stop sign, we would jump out of the car and throw them as hard as we could at the other cars so that we would get to school with mayonnaise, ketchup, mustard, every condiment covered, splattered all over the cars. It was like the funnest event. It was the greatest. We had a lot of fun.
Wow.
It was with that energy that we entered into POD. And POD stands for
Problems of Democracy.
Problems of Democracy. You believe that?
What are the problems of democracy?
That's why she's here. That's Judge.
Just different views on different issues, how to work things out when people disagree. Just government in general.
Okay, all right.
So before we get into all that stuff, what is it, you were in school when you taught us.
Right.
What is it about government that is attractive to you?
I'm really not sure. I just love the ideology and figuring out how to make things work together. I love that government rules every part of our life. And I think it's really important to have good people in government and to know what each branch of government does, so that if you have a problem, you know where to go for help.
Do you think that most people are kind of unaware of government in general and how much it plays a role in their lives?
I really do. And a lot of people say they don't like politics. You can't escape it. Politics is in every part of your life, whether you recognize it as that or not.
Well, I learned just through the whole COVID situation that a lot of the attention gets put on who's the president. But I think what we've learned in 2020 is that your local officials, that's where it really matters. Because when you think about communities that were impacted or not impacted by COVID and how bad it was or how bad it wasn't, it really has to deal with who were the local officials, who was the mayor, and me personally, again, someone who government in general isn't my wheelhouse of things, I learned a lot of just about just the different levels of, I want to say not power, but authority that those different people have. And just the impact, and it's one of those things that's sad to learn it from experience like that, having to go through that or having to understand that in those ways. But yeah,
good insights. So we talk of good government and bad government, right?
Right.
Who historically, like, we're standing on the shoulders of people, other nations. Who are we standing on the shoulders of? Like, how did we get here? Who are our influences?
going clear back even to the Revolutionary War, it was people who didn't want the government they were living in, so they started their own. And I think we've just come from there. And I mean, there's always going to be two political parties, but again, like I said earlier, it's trying to find a way to make the sides come together. Because a lot of times everybody wants the same thing, they just go about it in different ways.
So do you think then, like you watch TV and people are so polarized, it's like there's this way over here, there's this way over here. Do you think that does not square with reality? Do you think people are not that polarized? It's just the media likes to do that?
I think a lot of times people are polarized. I think the media plays on that a lot and makes the situation sound worse than it is. Because everybody has to, at some point, meet if they're going to get anything done.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah, so now that I know that you taught POD, so I've always found it just interesting in general, because human beings are flawed. It doesn't matter who the person is. Human beings are flawed. Human beings are always a work in progress. I always thought the idea of democracy is kind of like it's worse when you have a king or a queen. But the idea of you're putting the power in the hands of the people. That can get extremely problematic, and it was one of those things I would love to pick the brain of our founding fathers and just say, okay, you know that everybody has their own opinions and views and all that. How do you expect that this is going to work when people are going a bunch of different ways? So why do you think democracy has worked in America for the last 200 some years, and do you think it can continue to work that way?
We have the oldest constitution in the entire world. A lot of countries change their constitution every few years, but I think our founding fathers, they had ideas, but they didn't restrict the constitution so much that they were telling people what to do. And I think that has a lot to do with it. So,
but correct me if I'm wrong, we're a republic. We're not a democracy.
Correct. Constitutional republic.
So explain that for people who you're like, forget it. We're not a democracy. That's a misunderstanding. We are a republic in the United States.
Well, see, there you go. That just goes to show I don't know anything about
the way that I understand it, caveat, the way I understand it is like, let's say you have a bike.
Okay.
You don't own that bike in a democracy. They could vote on, is that your bike? Can we take your bike? But in a republic, you own that is your bike. You own the bike. So they can't vote either way to do that to you.
Okay.
So we are a republic. That's why we say we pledge allegiance, blah blah blah, this and that. I hope no one gets mad at me. I just had a brain fart. I can't remember how it goes. I just remember weird, complex things, but simple things. That just goes to show you I wasn't paying attention in school for learning those things.
You missed that day.
I missed that day. I missed that day every day that we did that.
I honestly can say I never fully. No one's ever explained it. The difference between I always thought they were kind of synonymous. Like there was a tad bit of difference.
We are a republic. Here's what we're going to do. We're kicking it out to the smart people out there. If you know the difference and you can explain it in a way that's simple for all of us, leave that in a comment. Is that fair?
Yeah.
That's great.
We'll take that.
Okay, awesome. Very good. Yeah. I had a question, and then I just lost it.
Okay, good, because I had an idea in the meantime.
Go ahead.
Okay.
The way that I see that you just described the Constitution is that it was vague enough. It reminds me of a bowling alley where you have the two gutters, and if you don't know what you're doing, you put up the baby bumpers, right? And so you have all this freedom in here to play, but the bumpers are the things that prevent you from going crazy.
That's a good analogy.
I am an analogy maker.
Very good.
If you like that analogy, drop a comment. And I think that's important because that's a cool way, because it's saying, like Seth alluded to earlier, we're giving you the freedom to live your life. We're not going to dip into your life, and rule it.
Not going to micromanage it.
Yeah. Although it's debatable now, because it seems that we're getting that way more and more and more in this country. And some people can argue and would argue that we need it at the state we're at. I'm not saying I agree with that, but I'm just saying you hear that argument. The idea is we can self-govern ourselves better than an entity outside of ourselves to govern us. But there has to be these guiding values that are keeping you within the lanes.
I agree.
It's a good analogy. So, talking about like problems with democracy, what do you think is in all of the years that you taught? Well, first of all, how long did you teach that course?
Just 6 weeks.
Just 6 weeks. Okay.
Yeah.
In those 6 weeks, what do you think was the number one takeaway that everybody had?
I think what I tried to make people think about, you can have your ideas, just be able to back them up.
Okay.
And as long as you can back them up, that's fine. That's your opinion.
And do you think that a lot of people in society, I know this is kind of a broad question, but do you think a lot of people in society struggle with that idea of having a belief in something without actually knowing why they believe it?
I think so, and I think the media has a lot to do with that. People tend to blindly follow. Not everybody comes up with their own idea. They just look at who's saying it and believe it because a certain person's saying it or a certain media source.
Okay. So, with you being you're a judge, correct? I just want to make sure, okay. Because the other thing I just learned is through Michael Giuliano is I just thought there was just one type of judge, and here come to find out there's many different types. There's judge of what, common pleas. Did I remember that correctly?
Yeah.
There you go. So why, when you were in school and you were thinking about what career you wanted to get into, why did you pick a judge? Why did you pick?
I honestly don't remember. I've wanted to be a judge my whole life. Since I was a kid. I don't know what it is that's fascinated me about them, but it hasn't disappointed. I love getting up every morning and going to work and putting on that robe. It hasn't disappointed.
Do you watch like the People's Court and Judge Judy and all those? No?
They get on my nerves so bad.
Do they really?
Yeah.
What's the number one? Because again, someone like myself, that's what I think of when I think of judge. What is the number one misconception that people have from watching those shows about judges?
First of all, I would never talk to somebody in my court the way some of those judges talk to people.
Yeah.
We're not so much. They hear kind of different sorts of cases than we do. We hear, like at my level, I hear traffic cases, summary offenses, which are things like disorderly conduct, harassment, trespass. I hear civil cases, that's where you see somebody for money, up to $12,000. I hear landlord-tenant cases, and then all criminal cases start in our courts. So we have a lot broader area than those judges do, and they're very short hearings. Sometimes ours can go a lot longer, but we're not old white men. And honestly, if I talked to somebody in my court like Judge Judy did, I'd be kicked out.
But old Judge, she wears that little doily.
Yeah.
Well, I think a huge part of that comes to just because it's on television and they need to make it compelling and all of that. Is there a television show? Is there a movie that accurately depicts what being a judge is like, or what?
I don't think so much a judge, but Law and Order, legally, their arguments are very sound. There are things that are taught in law school, like right out of the book. However, defendants don't always break down in a crying confession. That doesn't happen in real life. But legally, their arguments are sound.
Cool. I heard another movie that I don't know if they trained lawyers to watch it at a time, and believe it or not, it's a movie you would never think. You know what I'm going to say?
My Cousin Vinny.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
Right, in evidence class, my evidence professor referenced that movie all the time.
I would have never in a million years guessed that.
Well, like one example, perception of things. The one woman said she saw in somebody else's window, but in the meantime, she couldn't see. She had glasses and couldn't see very well. So if you can't see through your own glasses, how are you going to see, what was it, across the street or something to somebody else's house?
But it wasn't just the idea. It's how he went about of showing and proving it.
Right.
I'll never forget the time when remember the grits?
That was it.
That was great. And I hope if you've ever watched My Cousin Vinny, go watch it. there's a part where it was like the murder took place at a certain amount of time, and he was in the deep south, and he's got this guy on there, and he's real, steadfast. And he said, "What'd you have for breakfast?" And this guy's taken back. He's like, "What do you mean? What I have for breakfast?" He's like, "What did you have for breakfast?" He's like, "Everybody knows in the South we eat grits." And he goes, "How long does it take you to eat grits?" And the guy goes, "Whatever, 20 minutes or a half hour, or whatever, however long it takes to boil them." He said, "Did it take you 5 minutes?" He goes, "Did you eat instant grits?" And the guy goes, "No self-respecting Southerner eats Southern grits." So he's like, "Well, how did it take you this amount of time to make grits when it takes the whole other universe to make grits in this amount of time?" So he used that as an example to show like his timeline was off. Anyway, but yeah, that was really good. Remember, he was in the back of the courthouse, and he was like, "How many fingers am I holding up to the lady?"
Yeah, the lady.
Turned the money up. He's like, "I rest my case." He's like, "I'm done with her."
I know what movie I'm watching tonight.
Yeah, watch it. It's got
Joe Pesci and Marissa Tomei.
And she won some kind of award for supporting actress, and everybody got super mad about it. It's still controversial to this day.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Awesome.
Boy, that just took a crazy, strange turn, huh? That was a good podcast today. I like it.
Yeah. So, who is like your biggest influence when it comes to when you wanted to be a judge? You said before we started the podcast, you said you wanted to be a judge since you were a little kid, right?
Right.
Who was that role model? Who was the person you looked to and you're like, I want to be a judge like them?
I didn't know any judges back then. Except I don't really have any idea what put that into my head, but just I always wanted to. But I think as a judge, it's important to show compassion and listen to people's story, and that reminds me a lot of my grandma.
Yeah. Because
she was very compassionate. She helped a lot of people. She never was selfish about anything. And I think just be compassionate and be respectful to people, and they'll be respectful back to you.
Why is it important to enter into someone's story in the courtroom?
Sometimes I'll look at a complaint before I get it. I'm like, well, I know how this one's going to end. But then you go in and the facts aren't anything you would have ever imagined, which is probably why they're in court. If it was a normal case, they wouldn't be in court. But things just always take twists and turns, and until you hear the whole story, you can't make a decision.
Gotcha. So, I imagine being a judge, you've seen all walks of life come into your courtroom.
Yeah.
How hard is it because you talk about being sympathetic and listening to someone's story, and how hard is it when you're sitting up there and you're looking at someone who you may have a completely opposite upbringing as you, opposite just way of living as you. How hard is it to sympathize with that person and their story, trying to see from their point of view?
I don't, excuse me. I just think of what they've been through in life, like I said, where they came from, what makes them think the way that they're thinking.
Okay. So in our previous interview we talked about just how, we kind of even touched on it here, about people, there seems to be like this tribalism that people have where it's, whether it be political or whatever, what is if you could give the world advice on how to see from other people's perspective, what would be the first step in doing that? Is understanding someone who's on the opposite end of the spectrum?
That's tough. So just maybe draw on your own life experiences. You probably have something in common. But just think, somebody who's poor is going to think differently than somebody who's rich. Think about where the person grew up, because some neighborhoods are rougher than other ones. Why would they do, or why would they think the things they do? For example, I was talking to a woman at Bible school one day, and she said she had been on a jury, and it was a criminal case with a shooting. And she said, they found the guy not guilty because there were no witnesses. How could this happen in the middle of the afternoon and there be no witnesses? I said, where did the person live? What do you think would happen to a witness? She's like, oh, I never thought of that.
Right, until you start to think about that that enter into their world, their story.
Right, and I mean, some people, somebody who grows up on a farm thinks differently than somebody who grew up in the city. I had one of those cases too.
That's interesting, huh?
It's powerful.
Yeah.
It's very powerful.
So does that change the way you'll hand down a verdict too?
Not necessarily.
No.
As a judge, I have to look more at the law, look at
Yeah.
the facts of what happened, how does the law apply to those facts. So I mean, it helps me understand the person, but it's not necessarily going to make a difference in my decision.
Yeah. So it's like, you remember when downloading music was actually a thing? We remember that. I don't know if you remember that. It was like LimeWire. Remember all those crazy things? You downloaded like songs and then 18,000 other viruses on your computer. It was a nice gift that it gave you.
Do you have some experience with this? Is this what you're alluding to?
I never actually did it. I wasn't that computer savvy.
I didn't know what I was. I probably just downloaded 8 songs anyway from, anyway. So how will a judge look at, let's say, for example, you got a kid that doesn't know anything about the law. It's their normal to download. It's like what you're doing. Every 16-year-old kid is downloading on LimeWire. And if you're out there listening to this and you don't know what LimeWire is, I apologize. You can Google it. That's probably, do they even Google anything anymore? Is that a word?
They just ask Siri.
Versus, so like technically they're doing something illegal, but they have no idea. They won't even know what they're doing is illegal. It's like breathing. Versus someone that is like a tech guy that is fully aware of, wrote the software to do it. They're both, you look at the law book, it's illegal, both wrong. But how could you hand out the same verdict to a kid that has no idea that what they're even doing is wrong? They won't even know what they're doing is wrong. Versus someone that's like, I know what I'm doing, I'm the mastermind behind this, or I'm fully aware of what I'm doing. Does that make sense? I don't know if there's like legal terms for that or what, but
that would be a case where, like, I'd look at where they're each coming from. If the kid honestly didn't know he was doing something wrong, that's where I would show leniency, maybe lecture him a little bit, get his attention.
Yeah, right.
But I wouldn't necessarily find him guilty, whereas the guy who knew exactly what he was doing, that's a different story.
Yeah, okay. Because it just seems like, where do you draw the line of, then everyone can be in trouble for everything in the world at a certain point, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there are things like, you just walk through life and you hear a story and you're like, I did that. I didn't know that was wrong, but I could have got in trouble for that. You didn't know. You didn't even know that would have been wrong.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned the music downloading thing, because I don't know if iTunes still does this. It used to be like if you were like, if I had my laptop and I was over at your house, as long as I had your permission and you had it enabled on your laptop, you and I could share music off of each other's iTunes accounts. So if I wanted to listen to Bruce Springsteen's new album, right?
Just hypothetically,
and you had it on your iTunes, you could share that album onto my iTunes account, and that was legal.
You mean because you're in my house?
Right, and because you bought it, you own it, you would then have the ability to share it, and somehow that was legal with Apple. But if you put it on the internet for the world to download, that would be illegal. In my 16-year-old brain, I used to fight because my dad was a police officer. He went to school for law. He used to get so mad. He's like, it's not the same thing. I'm like, it sounds exactly like the same thing. So I would be that kid who I had no idea.
Right.
So
just makes you wonder as you're sitting here with a judge. Just those are little things that make you wonder.
Just discretion, like I said, leniency. Look at the person's intent.
Yeah.
Those are different things that we would consider.
Yeah. So what's the worst thing that can happen? What's the worst thing a person can do when they come into your courtroom?
See, I don't hear the big cases. Those go to common pleas court. The really ugly cases I hear are child abuse cases. Those are the ones that I take home with me and I can't shake. I would say those are probably the worst. And I won't go into any details, but I've heard some gruesome ones. Yeah. They make me sick to my stomach.
Sure. I can't even imagine.
And when I go into court, I have to be calm, not let anyone know my opinion, and treat that person the same way I would treat anybody else. So sometimes that's rough.
Yeah.
No, was that, because that is I can only imagine how difficult that has to be when you're sitting in, when you're hearing these horrific cases, and you're trying to not show your emotion, not trying to keep as calm as possible. Was that something that you had to learn, or is that something you always naturally had?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
I could stay calm, but it's just really hard sometimes to look at the person even.
Yeah.
It just, some of the bad ones. And with the child abuse cases, I have nieces and nephews. Their faces popped into my head, and I think that made it a lot worse.
Yeah.
But then there's other cases that, retail thefts, they see them every day. There was one guy who, he was one of my favorite defendants. He just got out of jail on probation. He went on a heroin bender. And he said he was in Walmart, and he was in checkout line with his girlfriend. He said, I'm gonna go steal a watch. And he went and stole a watch. He said she was so mad she didn't talk to him for a couple days. So by the time he gets in front of me, he's coming down off heroin. And he was being funny, and he knew he was being funny, but he couldn't hold his head up off the table. And me and the officer were just laughing. And he's like, she's so mad at me. I did it. She didn't do it. I did it. And there are things like that they're just funny.
Little gifts you get throughout throughout the time there. And you've been the judge for 12 years?
14.
Wow.
I got appointed by Governor Rendell, and I served a year and a half on the appointment before I ran.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I've served 2 full terms. I'm up for re-election again this year.
And you're actually being challenged this year,
yes.
Correct?
Mm-hmm.
Is that something new for you?
The first time I ran back in 2009, I was challenged then. But luckily, back in 2000, I'd run for state representative. I'd helped other people with their campaigns. So I knew how to organize a campaign, and that helped tremendously. And then the second time I wasn't opposed, and then this time I'm opposed again.
Is that common or uncommon?
It depends on the office. For judges, it's not particularly common, but it happens.
Mm-hmm. And not just for what you're doing, but just in general to teach and help anybody listening. What's the best thing? What are the best practices for being organized and running a campaign or anything like that? Like, what's the top do's and don'ts?
Get everything done ahead of time. Keep lists. If anybody says they're going to help you, write down their name. Even if they tell you 2 years ahead of that, write down their name. And a lot of people don't know how to help you unless you tell them. So make the call, tell people what you need, and usually they're pretty good about it. So just get everything done ahead of time, or stay ahead of the game. Know what point certain things are expected.
Being proactive, staying organized.
Yeah.
So it's really
people.
Basic things that people should know if they're going to do something like that.
But they don't necessarily know how to organize it. That's something you have to learn as you go. Or get somebody to help you who does know.
Right.
So in the, you said 14 years you've been doing this? 14 years that you've been a judge. What is the number one thing that you've benefited from the most, or that you've learned the most in those 14 years?
One thing this kind of has to do with campaigning too is being involved in the community. Know the people you represent. And that goes back to, how do you see things from different people's point of views. Stay active in the community. Know the people. Know who you're representing. And plus, it's just kind of fun to be in some of those activities. It's really neat.
Yeah. So because we have a lot of listeners who are actually, believe it or not around here at all. Like one of our, we have these little hot spots of listeners where we have 10 people downloading our episodes. One of the groups is it's Washington, Virginia. Whatever reason, one person listened to it, liked it, shared it with their friends, and then so we have a little community there. So for those individuals who don't live anywhere close to here, what makes this area, talking Hermitage, Sharon, West Middlesex, what makes this area so unique as compared to the rest of the United States?
I think our family values around here are very predominant. A lot of people leave the area and then come back to raise their families. I think that's a big deal.
It definitely has like a small town feel to it.
Very much so.
You know what I mean? Even over in Newcastle where I live, it doesn't feel like it's a population of 18,000 people. It feels like it's a population of 1,000. but it's a very close-knit community. I would definitely agree with that.
I thought you were going to say yins.
My father was an English teacher. He'd roll over. I mean, well, he's not dead, but
We had the battle of the weirdos, and I was in school in Georgia, so we roll up there, and it was the battle of the y'alls versus the small group of Western PA-ites, and it was the y'alls versus the yins, and we would look at each other, who's weirder, not realizing the answer to that is both.
Right.
Both of us are weirdos. No normal people say either of those words.
Well, as I've told you, is that the longer, because I've always just considered myself just an odd, weird, a good person, but weird person. But the more I've just talked to people, I've gotten to know people too. Everyone's weird in their own way. Everyone has something that makes them unique, and it's something that I think we should be kind of proud about. Is the fact that we are unique, we are good, but weird.
Yeah, see, he's riffing off of how I introduce almost everybody. That's how he's like, so and so. I'm like, yeah, good guy, weird but good.
Yeah.
And one day, you introduced me to 4 people, and you said that about all 4 of them. And I actually said, I was like, every time I introduce you, Mr. Pastor Anthony, I would say, he's a good guy, a little weird, and he immediately knew what I was talking about.
See, what you have to watch for is when I reverse them. When I say weird but good, then they're more weird than good.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the thing you have to be careful, be mindful. You're like, oh.
That's awesome. So if you had to mentor someone, let's just say actually, you know what? I'll spice this question up even more. Let's say a 8-year-old you walks up to you right now, like that. What was that Bruce Willis movie, The Kid, where he was his younger self?
I don't remember.
Okay, well, all right, skip past it. Your 8-year-old self walks up to you, and you had to give your 8-year-old self one piece of advice, something that now you've learned now. What would you tell your 8-year-old self?
Keep sight of your goals.
Okay.
You might get to them. I didn't go straight for being a judge. I went a very roundabout way, but it worked for me because I always kept in mind what the end game was, where I wanted to be.
Did you have to be a lawyer first? I thought you had to be a lawyer before you were a judge.
For my level of judge, we're the bottom. If you're not a lawyer, then you have to take a certification class in Harrisburg. So it's about 50-50 across the state, I think.
Okay, of how many people are lawyers versus how many people took the certification.
Right.
So what I'm hearing is that based off of my POD academics, that I could run for magisterial.
Yes, you could. Just don't run against me.
I won't.
Yeah, I was a lawyer, so I didn't have to take the class.
Was that ever something you thought you'd like to do? Is to take the bar and become an attorney?
Well, I knew you had to do that to be a judge. I didn't realize, for my level, you don't have to.
You did do that, though.
Yeah, I did.
Take the bar.
Mm-hmm.
So you could be an attorney.
I am an attorney.
Oh, you are an attorney?
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't listening.
The bar exam law school was terrible.
Was it?
And the bar exam was the worst summer of my life.
What?
Every lawyer will tell you that, though.
Can you pretend that you're talking to a 3-year-old?
Okay.
Because people hear the bar. What is the bar?
The bar exam or the bar?
I don't know. See, there you go.
Okay.
Both. Do it all.
If you just talk about the bar, you're talking about all the attorneys.
Okay.
Attorneys are the bar. Each county has bar association, which you pay dues to, but you interact with each other and take care of legal issues that might come up. At least give an opinion to the state. The bar exam, take everything you learned in law school and everything you didn't learn, and it's all fair game. It's a 6-hour day of multiple choice and a 6-hour day of essay. And the essay question is at least 1 page long. So it's a lot of writing, it's a lot of studying. You pretty much have to take a bar review course. I think when I graduated law school, I want to say the course was like $600 or something like that.
What school was that?
I went to Akron.
Do you get to use your resources for the test? Like when you're taking your bar exam, so you can't let me grab that book, let me grab that. You can't.
No. So it's like I said, and they can take it. I mean, they give you the topic. Like There's certain things that are on the Pennsylvania test. There's certain things that are on the state test. But pretty much it's any question in any area of law, whether you studied it in law school or not.
Wow.
So, yeah, that's what makes it so hard.
And then
Don't know what to expect.
Who judges this? Are the other attorneys?
Yes. There's a panel of attorneys. I think, if I remember correctly, like one essay, one attorney will grade everybody's that essay because they know what they're looking for. So there's like one person for every question. Is my understanding.
Do you go before them? Or
No.
This is a silent, invisible group?
Yes.
See, this is strange because when I was going through ordination, you have to jump through several hoops, and one of them is something that's actually kind of like that. You have these Bible content exams, you have polity exams, you have all these different exams, and they send you them, and they're closed documents. You open them up, and you have a certain amount of time you have to do them all, and then you seal them back up, and they're sent out to strangers, that are reading these things. So it's kind of similar in that way. I never realized that, and so a lot of it was subjective to the reader. You can have a very conservative guy reading let's say, the Bible content, and he may reject it because it's too conservative. Or you may have a very liberal person. Anyway, we all get the point, right?
Yeah.
So
it was kind of like that. I mean, even studying, there were flashcards that you could get for every different subject. And so I was studying with my flashcards, and there were questions, I swear I was right, but the back of the card said something different. And even knowing what they said, I still thought I was right. So a lot of it comes down to interpretation.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what attorneys do in court. You have the facts, you have the law, which one's in your favor, because that's what you play.
Right. Interesting.
So what things besides teaching Mr. Pastor Anthony, what things did you do before you became a judge and a attorney and all?
Okay, well, I went to Westminster College, and I majored in international politics and Spanish, and I minored in history and secondary ed.
Okay.
So from there, I got a job at the sheriff's office, and I worked there, I think, 4 years. But working there in the courthouse really helped me in the end because I met attorneys, I met political people, I met elected officials. So I quit that job to run for state representative, and some of those people who were there helped me. And then I lost that race, so I went to law school. Practiced law for a couple years, and then this position opened up. And I've known I wanted this position. So it was actually those people way back when I worked in the sheriff's office, the people who helped me when I lost my campaign, that I impressed, and they helped me get the governor's appointment. And then they helped me again when I was running for election. So things come full circle. You never know who you're going to run into, so be courteous to everybody.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Because it could come back around.
Yeah, right. That's true. So what about hobbies? What about fun? When you unplug from being the judge,
I love Netflix. I read a lot. I like to scuba dive. I haven't done that in a few years though. But COVID messed it up last summer.
What's good on Netflix?
I was gonna say, what's your favorite? What is your favorite show?
Are you allowed to say it? Or what?
I don't know that I really have a favorite. I like the Chicago ones: Chicago Fire, Chicago Med, and PD. PD's my favorite, obviously. And I like a lot of crime shows. When I read books, they're all crime books. You think I get enough of that at work, but
there is something. There might be a documentary or something like this out there that explains this, but I would love to just know why humans love just the world of crime, like crime TV shows, crime. Because my thing is, I love crime podcasts. When I worked in Pittsburgh as a medical driver, I would listen to podcasts all day long. They were all murder mystery or true crime, and it's something about it. It's just so compelling.
Yeah, it is weird. I mean, you see, it's either all of those shows on TV, or you see the ones with the medical, the doctors, and all that. But those are the two big genres, right? That you see all the time.
I think with crime, people don't think like that. And so it's always a surprise. You don't know what's going to happen.
It's intriguing.
Yeah, I think so.
Did you ever see that really juicy Chicago PD or the Law and Order where they were busting that kid for stealing LimeWire videos?
No.
That was a good one.
Feel free to bring it back.
I brought it full circle.
There you go. Yeah. Took a second.
A couple fun questions before we wrap up. All right. This is something new I just discovered. We asked, do you know Michael Muah? He's the commissioner here.
No.
He was just in here a little bit ago. And we've already answered these. So we can't re-answer them every show. People will be like, we know what Seth's going to say. We know what he's going to say. You ready?
Okay.
All right. Let's say that you happen to get shipwrecked. We don't know how this even happens, but you are.
Okay.
And every one of your needs are met. And you have your family there. What are the two things you're also bringing with you?
Probably scuba gear would be a good idea.
Yeah, that would be.
And books.
Okay.
A lot of books.
Yep.
Any one book in particular, like?
My absolute favorite book is A Time to Kill by John Grisham. I don't know if either of you guys have read it.
I know him. I don't.
I know there was a movie, but the
movie
never. Yeah,
they're never as good as the book. It starts out with a really, and this is where the movie loses a lot because you don't understand the intensity. The first chapter is a really gruesome rape of a 10-year-old girl. Then they left her laying on the side of the road. She'd been on her way to the store. When she didn't come home, they sent her brother looking for her. And he found her and he carried her home. And she saw her dad and she was crying, Daddy, I was calling you. Where were you? I was calling you. He goes out. He goes to the courthouse, and I think it was the day of the preliminary hearing or the arraignment of these two, deep South rednecks. I guess I failed to mention that. It was a little black girl and a black family with the deep South, KKK rednecks. And they were walking through the lobby of the courthouse, and he jumps out of a closet and kills them. And that's the basis of the story. And it's very good versus evil, moral versus the law. How far would you go for your family? It was really just, everything about it was intriguing. Just fascinating. It was really good.
Is Matthew McConaughey in that movie, by chance?
Yeah, I think he was the attorney in the movie.
I don't remember watching it, but I remember, hearing about it.
Yeah.
That was cool. Wow. That
Just it's an intent. It's intense.
Yeah.
But it was a very good book.
It's a scuba gear book. What was the name of the book again?
That book was A Time to Kill.
Time to Kill. I'll have to look at finding the audiobook for that because it sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah, that's a good idea. The audiobook. I think you'd like it.
I think so. I love it.
Oh yeah. With the true crime podcasts, it was just one of those things I got addicted to. I couldn't wait. I actually, my wife kind of laughed because I would come home from work and I wanted to hear the next episode, but I didn't want to wait until the next day to listen to it. So I'd be like, honey, I'm going to go cut the grass. And she'd be like, you just cut it yesterday. And then I would just quickly go outside, and it was just so that I could keep listening to the episodes. So I would like the audiobook of that. That'd be great.
Yeah, I think that's a cool idea.
Yeah,
Let me know how it goes, because I'd listen to that.
Okay.
I want you to be the guinea pig if it's terrible. Because it's not that the book's terrible, it's the readers sometimes are terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true.
All right, I have another question.
Okay.
You leave here today,
Mm-hmm.
you're walking your car, and you get to your, wherever your little workplace is, and you see a lottery ticket on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
You pick it up and scratch it, $10 million.
Mm-hmm.
What are the first two things you're doing?
Paying off all my debt and taking a really good vacation.
Yeah. You know what's really weird about that?
What?
Both of my answers were almost exactly the same as that, except mine was pay off. I said I would draw a circle around all my friends and family, pay off their debt, and then take all those same people on a cruise for a vacation. Same idea.
But you got enough money.
Yeah.
And I would buy a big house in the middle of nowhere.
Right. To unplug.
Yeah, I grew up in the country. I have neighbors now. They're very, very nice people, all of them. But I have neighbors.
Yeah.
I just want a big house on a big piece of property where there's nobody around.
No, I can understand that, especially if you work with people all the time.
Yeah.
There's just a time where you want to walk outside of your house and you don't want to see anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not always, but I can certainly appreciate that.
It's peaceful too.
Yeah. Yeah.
See, I grew up always in big cities. We moved around a lot growing up, but we always lived in St. Louis, Hartford, Connecticut, Burlington, Vermont. So Newcastle for me is that's small, right?
Right.
And so to me, my dad, his dream is that he would love to move to Montana. and have like a ranch, and like your next neighbor is like 20 miles away. And me, I'm the exact opposite. Like Pastor's been in my house. It's not at all like off on its own, but to me it drives me nuts because I feel like I'm away from everyone. But like even though like I have two neighbors who are directly next to me, but to me, like the country, I could never do that.
No.
In fact, my brother sent me this picture. It was of like an island with a house in the middle of it, and the thing actually said, he sent it to my dad. It said, the guy who lived here must have been a pastor. Because it's like you get so tired of people.
Yeah.
So, well, listen, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you enjoy the podcast?
I did.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. We had a lot of
It
fun.
was.
Awesome. Well, actually, no, go ahead. You're the one who usually does the outros.
I'll do the outro. All right.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us today at Engage Podcast Studios. We hope you enjoyed the conversation with Judge Jennifer Nicholson. We do ask that if you like what you heard, hit the subscribe, hit the like button, and you'll get more of what you see here. And we look forward to connecting with you next week. Stay safe and stay blessed.